Fantastic. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Alastair Beddow. I'm the Managing Director at Meridian West. Really pleased to have joining me today Jenny Richardson from Hogan Lovells, as well as my colleague Silvia Grigoroiu, who's also a director at Meridian West. Today we're going to be chatting about one of it's a subject that combines two of my favourite passions, actually, establishing client listening as a growth pillar. So both client listening, which we've been supporting at Meridian West lots of firms on for the last 2 decades, as well as growth strategies. So combining those two elements together. We're going to hear from Jenny shortly about some of the exciting things that are happening in this area at Hogan Lovells. And before we do that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Sylvia, who's going to set the scene for us on the topic. So I'm going to hand over to you, Sylvia.
Great. So as Alastair mentioned, we are talking about two kind of favorite topics here at Meridian West. And, you know, as an established client listening program can always be very beneficial for the business and for the clients. But, you know, in short, this doesn't come without challenges when it comes to kind of implementing this at the core of the company. So I think we have established during our conversations with clients in our previous breakfast on the same topic, a few of the challenges here can be, you know, competing priorities, feedback versus client understanding, sample availability, IT challenges, you know, all sorts of challenges that can come across establishing a client listening program at the core of the business, such as, you know, buying from sector heads, CRM challenge, leadership support, fear of feedback challenge, lack of resources, follow-up, you name it, lack of training and agreeing a question set culture can be, you know, in between those challenges. But, you know, the kind of benefits to an established client listening program can always be seen as a positive. You know, you by constantly assessing services, firms can kind of assess, you know, whether the services are truly delivering results. So firms can identify areas to improve and upgrade offerings. Enhance client retention, identify those opportunities that come from client conversations. So we have also discussed in previous kind of webinars and roundtable events, different other topics, but related to, you know, positioning the client listening as a strategic kind of pillar. So one of the topics that we've discussed would be the ROI of a client listening program. So how do you kind of measure this? Or embracing client first culture, embedding client listening into your firm's culture. We do have, you know, materials around how to break down silos and unlock additional value, turning client insights into commercial opportunities. And we have also kind of done a lot of research towards, you know, this science, if you can call it like that. So CLIMB is our client listening maturity benchmark. We have invited quite a few clients and peers to complete this survey that we've created in-house, and kind of allowing them to benchmark to see where the maturity level is and how to kind of work towards, you know, a growth there. We are also working on lots of client journey mapping programs with our clients. Meridian AI, again, is a product that we've developed at Meridian West with all these challenges in mind to kind of help firms process the information received from client listening and kind of use this in a wiser way. We have, as I said, discussed all these topics in various events. It's not something that it's kind of ending here. I think the aim of having all these conversations with our clients and our peers is to kind of identify ways to grow all these client relationships and use the data in a more effective way. So as part of the program criteria, as we've came up with a few pieces of advice, which, we could maybe advise our clients to work towards. So one of them would be, that commercial impact that client listening can have on, the business and KPI. So through client listening, we can identify revenue growth opportunities, new series, services that can be developed off the back of that feedback that we receive from the client. Questions around share of wallet with key clients and those friendly clients can be, questions that can give you more in-depth information. But last but not least, on this commercial impact criteria would be revenue at risk that can be, identified and mitigated straight away. This is quite an important piece of advice here. Another criteria, another kind of program engagement would be another point that we've identified as part of our advice. So as part of the client listening program, we need to look at all those clients that work with the firm, not necessarily the top tier clients. So the number of client interviews and survey conducted is quite important to kind of drill into the data and, identify growth opportunities. The response rates could be, a factor that we can look into, and how to grow this, and, the number of partners and fee earners that are participating into the program is quite an important factor here. So how do we grow this percentage of stakeholders within the business that can actually help us with the client listening program? The next criteria, it's around actions and follow-up. So we are collecting all this data from the client listening programs. However, we need to kind of think about what we do with the data. So what percentage of the feedback items actioned or were actioned or followed up on, and how do we kind of make sure that all of these actions are being touched on by the relevant stakeholders, by the relationship owners. I guess we can look at the time to close the feedback loop with clients when it comes to an action that needs to be taken. How do we make sure that this advice is kind of being provided straight away to the client, and the action has been closed. I think.
Yes.
I
think it's probably a good chance to maybe take a pause there. Thanks, Silvia, and bring in Jenny. So for those of you who don't know, Jenny is involved in managing the client listening program at Hogan Lovells. She's a senior client development manager. And prior to today's session, I just did a quick reminder of who Hogan Lovells are to myself. So those of you who don't know the firm, formed very interestingly one of the first real kind of big transatlantic mergers well over a decade ago now with US firm Hogan and Hartson, British law firm Hogan Lovells. Now a real titan of the global legal industry, with approaching, I think, 3,000 lawyers globally. Revenues are over $2.5 billion. So really a leader in the market. So Jenny, it'd be good maybe just to set the scene for us. Perhaps just tell us a little bit about your role and what the client listening program looks like at Hogan Lovells.
Thank you. So hi, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be able to share with you a little bit more about our client feedback program. So we originally established this in the beginning over 10 years ago. So with all client feedback programs, I'm sure those of you on the call that have your own programs already in place will recognise that they start relatively slowly to begin with. So over 3 years ago, we set out our approach around client service reviews, mid and post matter reviews, and also post pitch debriefs. More recently, over the last few years, we also capture informal feedback, and that's feedback gathered from our wider conversations with clients outside of interviews themselves. But of course, those can be very rich pieces of feedback that we capture centrally. So just a little bit of history. We initially started relatively small scale, wanting to really consciously work on building up momentum, demonstrating the value that gathering those really fantastic direct client insights can bring to the firm. So really hearing that voice of the client, you know, the fact that we could sell to our partnership, that clients really wanted to give their feedback, they value that opportunity. It's certainly industry best practice, and over the last decade where our program has built up, we now know, you know, many more of our contemporaries in other firms, you know, have also quite sophisticated client feedback programs. So our clients are getting asked for this feedback and they want to give it. So of course, we know as marketing and business development professionals that having those direct conversations is so invaluable to build that client loyalty, really listening to the client, investing time in them, placing their considerations at the forefront. And what we were also able to do over time, once we got a body of feedback into our system, was really be able to identify overarching trends and themes. And that really links into the theme of today's conversation. Is not just around those brilliant relationship improvement insights that we gain from every single interview, because there's always far more that we learn from every conversation that you would ever imagine, whether it's small tweaks to relationships or it's the larger opportunities to really grow and institutionalize those relationships. We're also able to, now that we've had the program established for a number of years, is to identify overarching trends and themes, and that really links into our strategic approach.
Yep. Fascinating. And sorry, I just want to remind people as well, I don't think I mentioned at the start, but if anybody does have questions for Jenny as we're going through, do drop them into the chat and we'll pick those up. So just kind of picking up what you were saying there, Jenny, in terms of the kind of, you know, decades plus evolution of the program. I'm kind of interested, you know, how do you think it's kind of seen now within the firm? Do you think it's seen as something that is really kind of supporting future growth?
Absolutely. So it's always been, certainly for many years, been a foundation building block of our firm's strategy. So it's named in the strategy. We report back to our exec board on progress. It's communicated completely firm-wide in terms of our results, and it's definitely part of the business as usual culture. Our partners are very supportive. They have recognised there's been numerous success stories across the regions, practice areas, sectors that are important to them from people that have conducted feedback. So we have that cultural buy-in. What we need to continue moving towards is that we don't just focus on you know, particular client groups. So we have, as you would expect, we have criteria around wanting to interview our client program, certain criteria to hit, you know, a certain target of interviews for them, but also above and beyond that, you know, just outside our client program, you know, other top clients, looking into feedback that we can gather that feeds into the strategic approach of the firm around ESG, things that really matter to our clients, you know, digitalization, and all of those things. And I think one of the things I wanted to share, and maybe things that helped us when we started out, that I think have stood us in very good stead, is we built the program around sort of three foundations really. One was prioritizing those really deep dive conversations with clients through in-person interviews. So originally they were very much face-to-face physically in the room, of course now almost all entirely over Zoom, but that was the foundation, more than surveys, which also have a very valuable role, and they're starting to feature more in our client feedback, but that was the backbone, and that's been really, really powerful. The other layer that I think was very interesting for us, and a success story, is we conduct those independent of our lawyers, and different firms have different approaches, but what's worked very well for us, and the clients have really used that as an opportunity to be very open with us and be able to share some really, really like deep, rich feedback. So our marketing business development team are our client listeners, and we have a really comprehensive program of training for them and mentoring and support from our fantastic internal team of client feedback sort of colleagues around me that, you know, we all work together to deliver this. And the key message that we've promoted throughout and still stands true is that, as I've said, every single interview is deeply worthwhile. We always gain something, whether it's a tweak on the relationship or a, you know, really significant opportunity that we can work with a client on.
Yeah. I think that message of, you know, every opportunity to hear from a client is, you know, is never a wasted opportunity is such a powerful message, and it's great to hear that there's the real kind of support from the firm and the recognition of that. We have had a question in from Claire, so thanks Claire, and I will jump to it now because I think it ties into what you were saying, Jenny, about the different types of channels you're using. The question is around capturing kind of informal feedback outside of structured reviews. You know, any thoughts or reflections on that? You know, either what's kind of worked or where you'd like to see that go in future.
So we have, a number of, see, as we all do, like detailed conversations with clients, sometimes in the annual relationship reviews, through a partner's day-to-day conversations, particularly on pitches is quite an interesting area to look into it. There's often very proactive feedback that a client will give us at the end that, you know, maybe circumnavigates the need for us to have a formal post-pitch debrief with them. So it's those sorts of things. So we label it informal just to distinguish it from our interviews. However, it's not to suggest that they are not really rich pieces of feedback. So we make sure everything we capture is, you know, something we could definitely improve upon, or something that's very detailed in terms of what we have done well for that client. So around our performance, around our team, around our matter management, around our approach to commercial aspects. And it's actually sort of like a wealth of things actually that people are sitting on in their emails, in their inboxes, that are really, really supplement our formal client listening beautifully, really. And we're able to get that wider picture.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because there's often so much insight there that just goes completely untapped, and, you know, outside of those kind of formal opportunities to listen, you know, we're kind of listening all the time. We're getting, you know, feedback, comments, you know, from either from those, you know, meetings or emails or whatever. So it's kind of great to hear that you're kind of feeding that into the machine, if you like. And I wonder, just on the topic of insight, now we're talking about the kind of, you know, listening as a kind of strategic kind of growth mechanism, and you were talking before about, you know, linking to areas like ESG, things that are kind of driving the business's growth strategy. But what about kind of opportunities on an individual client level? How much are you using the kind of listening program to really surface opportunities there, and how do those feed back to the teams that need to know that information? So
we, very early on in our client feedback journey, we adopted technology and the benefits that brings to us. So we house everything centrally in a database, and, you know, that's supported by some really fantastic technology that can work with us to extract what we need to. Well, what we're doing more recently is using that to pull out, whenever we need to, a comprehensive roundup of opportunities that have come from interviews by practice areas or sectors. It also works very well on the individual relationship level. So our client listeners, our client account managers, they are front and centre at making sure that those opportunities are followed up on. So what we're beginning just to look at is the mechanism for how we identify how those opportunities were responded to. We know they are being responded to. You know, everyone's very conscientious about keeping the client's wishes front and centre and delivering on those. But we're trying to, you know, work out, how do we take our programme to the next level? You know, there's lots that in Silvia's slide deck that we are running at the moment, all of those different programme criteria to a different degree. All of those are in play at the moment, but some are, you know, earlier in their sort of evolution, if you like. Yeah.
And, you know, to me, one of the words that I'm hearing a lot at the moment is this idea of kind of accountability. So as you say, how do you make sure that, you know, the actions, the opportunities that are coming through are, you know, are being actioned or being followed up on, and where's the kind of accountability around that. And I don't know, Silvia, from your perspective, you're obviously working across not just law but other sectors as well. Any thoughts on the kind of best practice around, closing the loop, not missing out on those growth opportunities? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, I think by using the technology again, it's a good opportunity to kind of close this loop and kind of draw back attention to those relationship holders that they need to come to the tool that they use to do or to receive the reporting and also close the loop. I think it's beneficial for everyone, for all the stakeholders involved, really, to kind of understand where the communication is and use technology to have those informed conversations. There's always, things can always happen. So, actions can always, appear in a relationship, but by having this kind of closed loop embedded into the client listening program, and by using the technology can be very beneficial.
Great. And I wonder, in terms of the reporting we've talked about, those individual client, level opportunities, but what about things that are, I guess, more kind of strategic? What is the, Jenny at Hogan Lovells, what's the kind of leadership team most interested in? What does the board want to know when it comes to, what's coming out of client listening?
So what we've been able to do is every now and again, periodically, take a step back and ask exactly those questions. How has our strategy altered? What are the strategic priorities of our clients right now, and how do we realign the discussion guide questions to reflect that? Also weaving in a little bit around sort of how our brand positioning is altering and how clients sort of perceiving us in that thing. So I think the main message there is our willingness to adapt and change, and always keeping in mind, what does our firm need us to be able to report on that helps them support the clients to the best of their ability. So sort of almost working it from the other way around, actually. And of course, I'm sure all of our clients share the same sorts of strategic objectives. As we said, ESG, of course, is front and center. That's just one example. And we work with different teams internally to break down the thematic results from our feedback and how we can weave insights into process improvements. So we talk to our pricing team, we talk to our learning and development team, our diversity, equity and inclusion team, just ESG team, just to name a few, members of the firm that are working on client solutions, and finding as many different uses for our client feedback data as we can, because then it's just an exponential success story. If we can keep using the data in all these different ways, it will be more successful. We'll get more certainly increased engagement across the program, and all of those clients will get the opportunity to actually share their insights, which we know they really value.
Yeah, and it's so true what you say. I think about adaptability. I think particularly, we've seen over the last few years, strategic planning cycles are getting a lot shorter. Your clients' businesses are kind of changing and their needs are changing really rapidly. So it makes complete sense that you'd be continually looking at, are we asking them the right questions? Are we feeding back the right kinds of information? I think the firms that I've seen where, client listing programs kind of remain unchanged for 5 years are the ones that kind of ossify and engagement drops. So you do need to make sure you're breathing fresh life in.
Being sort of unafraid to change, and we have made some quite substantial changes to what we felt right and was sort of best practice maybe towards the beginning of our program. We've sort of altered our approach on some things, and I think it's just willingness to change, willingness to just adapt, and also making sure that in the conversation they're very client-led. So being agile around your discussion guides. Don't be the backbone of the conversation, but don't be completely beholden to them. Let the client direct the conversation in the way that they want to.
And you were mentioning before, obviously, that all the different uses that you're putting the insight to. I mean, is part of that, squeezing as much value out of it as possible? Is part of that being able to then demonstrate the kind of ROI? Are you kind of under pressure to say, look, this is budget and time well spent as a team in Hogan Lovells?
I think it's probably true across almost any firm. Anything that we are putting a lot of investment in, and our client feedback team, it does have a substantial team behind it, and we have the technology side, and we work with external agencies such as yourself around supporting it. Absolutely, yeah, we need to be able to demonstrate that it is providing our clients, end goal is providing our clients with what they need in terms of relationship improvements and tweaks that we can make to our client offerings.
Yeah,
it's very
fantastic.
Sometimes easier said than done to draw those ROIs. I know we're probably all in the same boat sometimes. We're trying to identify success stories that directly link to that, but they're all there if we sort of think about it.
And I wonder, just on that note, maybe, sorry, I don't know whether you've still got those slides, but there's that nice kind of one-pager summary that's got those all the different kind of metrics that we were just talking about there. Might be a nice way to bring this conversation to a close a little bit. Yeah, I think in terms of actually ways of just demonstrating impact, and I think that is something that as you were saying, Jenny, I think more teams are under pressure to to demonstrate the value, the impact, and there's a whole range of ways that can be done. And I think Silvia, you were kind of talking about some really interesting ones there in terms of some hard-edged commercial impact. We know that boards like numbers, they like KPIs, but also looking at engagement and follow-up and commitment, and that kind of thing as well. So I wonder, because I know we only have a couple of minutes left, and just a reminder, if there are any last questions, we'll try and cover those as well. But Jenny, if you were kind of having your time over, is there anything you do kind of differently, or is there kind of big kind of lesson you've learned along the way that that you're happy to share with the group, that you think you'd really identify as a kind of lesson for yourself from your journey?
I think probably, as I've sort of mentioned, keeping the emphasis on the client centric. They're sort of, it's feedback provided by them, but we need to make it a really positive experience for them in those discussions, that it doesn't feel like a generic discussion guide, purely led conversation. Again, that we always capture the nuggets that we get from every conversation and share those. I think if those are two sort of undeniably beneficial things that we really sort of learn from, slowly building up momentum with the partners that are really keen and have appetite initially, and that sharing those success stories far and wide will really generate the cultural change that you need, so that there's no fear of feedback, because one of the challenges mentioned at the start of the session, positioning it so that it's really seen as client insights. Yeah.
And I wonder, just I know we've ticked to the 1:30, but there's been a great question coming from Eve that I just want to cover before we wrap up, which is that she's saying that one of the big barriers that she's seen is just people being time poor, not having the enough time to really kind of focus on this. That affects engagement, volume of insight. I guess from a Hogan Lovells perspective, how do you try and make sure that this does become business as usual, something that people are able to commit to alongside everything else that's part of their day job?
I think it's a really good question, and it's something that we always have to refresh our approach to. As things become more business as usual, it can also be more difficult sometimes to get the appetite's there, but get the the green light sometimes to get things in clients' diaries. So we take all of the legwork away from the partners, so their input is very light touch. So we lead the whole process, which is very much in our favour. That helps enormously. I think approaching it from all sorts of different aspects. So you can look at engagement from your client program, from outside your client program, from the pitches won and lost, from matters at a certain threshold, lateral hires, the feedback that they might want to do with clients they're bringing across. So try and think as creatively as you can about all the different sort of facets of the program, and how you can arrive at nominations for interviews from various different angles. I think that helps. Again, the time poor piece is, there's no easy way around that. I think just try to make it, if at all possible, as light a touch for the partners, as simply giving the green light to the interview and sort of handling all the rest of it.
Yeah.
If at all possible. Easier said than done, I know.
It is, but I think this is all part of that continuous journey, isn't it? The kind of the more you can demonstrate the impact and the success, the more there's going to be that demand, but also that kind of permission internally, I think, for people to say, well, look, we've got a great team who are running this program. They're making it easy for me. All I need to do is kind of green light it and say, go ahead. And if they can take care of, a lot of the heavy lifting around that and give me great insight back, then I think that's a great position to be in. So I really want to thank you, Jenny, because I feel like we could probably stay all the rest of the day chatting about this topic, but I'm going to bring it to a close now. I'm also going to thank Silvia for your input as well. Thanks everyone for joining us, and I hope you'll be able to join us on another Meridian West webinar very soon. Thanks everyone.